Mr. Richardson, I think we'll call the regular Township Council meeting for the purposes of a public hearing to order. Of course, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples, and in particular, acknowledge our valued relationships with the Katzie, Kwantlen, Matsqui, and Semiahmoo First Nations. With that, Mr. Richardson, the preamble.
A public hearing is a statutory requirement under Section 464 of the Local Government Act and must be held before third reading of a community plan, land use contract amendment bylaw, heritage designation bylaw, or heritage revitalization agreement bylaw. During a public hearing, council acts in a quasi-judicial role for the purpose of allowing persons who believe their interest in property is affected by a bylaw, permit, or other matter to make representations to council, either orally, by written submission, or to add comments to or elaborate upon correspondence that may have already been presented to council concerning the bylaws. It is important to note that council is not able to receive any additional information on the bylaws following the public hearing as dictated by case law. The hearing procedure involves an explanation from the Community Development Division on the purpose of the proposed bylaws and to hear from individuals regarding the bylaws. In order to ensure that all interested parties have a reasonable opportunity to be heard, speakers are requested to keep representations as brief and succinct as possible and no longer than 5 minutes in duration, excluding the time required for questions from council. Speakers will be asked to state their name, neighborhood, and city for the record. And if referring to prepared remarks, to submit copies of these to the township clerk. Decorum must be always maintained. This includes refraining from applause, booing, or heckling. To assist with large numbers of speakers, individuals must advise the township clerk and sign the speakers list prior to the commencement of the public hearing. The names on the speakers list will be read out during the hearing. Individuals who have already addressed council and wish to add further submissions will wait until the people that have not yet addressed council have had an opportunity to speak. All submissions and speaker lists are considered part of the public record. Council members should not express their views nor debate the bylaws. However, they may question speakers to clarify particular points in their submissions. Council may consider third reading or third reading and final adoption at this meeting or at its next regular meeting. Thank you.
So with that, can I get a motion to adopt the agenda, please? Moved by Councillor Pratt, seconded by Councillor Bailey. Call the question on A1. That carries unanimously. Mr. Richardson, item C1.
Thank you, Worship. Item C1 deals with family-friendly policy exemptions. Your Worship, Council recently adopted housing policy for new development applications with 10 or more residential units, providing for 15% two-bedroom, 10% three-bedroom, and an overall unit size of not less than 725 square feet. Proposed bylaw 6015 introduces tools to encourage market and non-market affordable housing options through inclusion of policy language that states reduce two-bedroom and three-bedroom requirements for purpose-built rental housing projects, and reduce overall average project unit size for purpose-built rental housing projects. Notice of this public hearing was published on May the 6th, 2024, with newspaper advertisements in the May 9th Langley Advance Times and the May 10th Aldergrove Star, meeting requirements of the Local Government Act. Your Worship, one written submission has been received and there are no individuals noted on the speakers list.
Great. For the first time, are there any submissions from the public on item C1? For a second time, are there any submissions from the public on item C1? And for a third and final time, are there any submissions from the public on item C1? With that, I'll close the public hearing on item C1. Does anybody wish to move third and final consideration of third and final reading? Moved by Councillor Van Popta, seconded by Councillor Rent. Call the question on consideration of C1. That carries unanimously. Does anybody wish to move the recommendation for the third and final reading? Moved by Councillor Rent, seconded by Councillor Bailey. Is there any discussion on C1? Seeing none, call the question on C1, third and final reading. That carries unanimously. Mr. Richardson, item C2.
Thank you, Worship. The subject ALR exclusion applications pertains to 27036 56th Avenue. The 4.5-acre site is designated industrial in the regional growth strategy, industrial in the official community plan, is an agricultural land reserve, and designated service and general industrial in the Gloucester Park community plan. This therefore depicts a site located on the south side of 56th Avenue, west of 272 Street. Staff recommend council support the exclusion and advance the application to the ALC for consideration. Your Worship, consistent with the requirements of the ALC, notice of this hearing was published on May 6, 2024, with newspaper advertisements on the May 9th Langley Advance Times and the May 10th All the Grove Star newspapers. Additionally, a total of 68 notices were mailed out, 1 written submission has been received, and there are no individuals noted on the speakers list.
Are there any submissions from the public on item C2? Second time, are there any submissions from the public on item C2? For the third and final time, are there any submissions from the public on item C2? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing on item C2. Does anybody wish to move the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Rent, seconded by Councillor Rampopta. Is there any discussion? I do have an amendment. Is there any discussion on the motion? Councillor Richter.
Yes, I'd like to know if the subject property is going to be taking any of the conservation land wildlife corridors out?
Mr. Richardson?
The subject lands as indicated on the plan would be dealt with in terms of any on-site streamside protection areas at time of council's subsequent consideration of rezoning. So the short answer to that is no.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So I have an amendment that staff initiate discussions with the proponent on a potential community amenity contribution proportionate to the value being created. Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Rent. Is there any discussion on that amendment? Seeing none, call the question on that amendment to C2. That carries. Councillor Richter opposed. Now back to the main motion as amended. Any further discussion on C2? Seeing none, call the question on C2 as amended. That carries. Councillor Richter opposed. Again, motion to terminate. Moved by Councillor Rent, seconded by Councillor Martins. Is there all those in favor? Opposed, and that's carried. Thank you.